The cross came in during the 73rd minute, and the ball hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. By the time it nestled in the back of Liverpool's net, Anfield had witnessed something more devastating than a Champions League quarterfinal defeat. By Thursday morning, the footage would be dissected frame by frame. By Friday, the dressing room would split into camps. But it started with 8 words whispered in fury in the tunnel, words that shattered a bond built over 3 seasons. Maybe it's time to accept that your best days are behind you. Don't forget to subscribe to Elite Ball Legends and like the video for your support. Thank you for subscribing. Alisson had been Liverpool's last line of defense since 2018. At 31 years old, he was still considered one of the world's elite goalkeepers, commanding his box, making impossible saves, distributing with the precision of a midfielder. His presence radiated calm. When Alisson was between the posts, Liverpool's defenders played with confidence, knowing that if they made a mistake, the Brazilian would be there to save them. Konaté had arrived in 2021 from Leipzig, a 22-year-old center-back with frightening athleticism and the physical tools to become world-class. At 6'4" with explosive pace and aerial dominance, he was everything modern football demanded. But more than his physical gifts, Konaté possessed something rarer, an almost telepathic understanding with Alisson. They communicated constantly during matches. Alisson would call out positioning adjustments. Konaté would signal when he was stepping up to press. When crosses came in, they had an unspoken agreement about who would claim the ball, Alisson's domain or Konaté's responsibility. It was beautiful to watch, a goalkeeper-defender partnership that had become one of the Premier League's most effective defensive units. But recently, something had shifted. Small moments. Konaté holding his defensive line a fraction longer before dropping. Alisson hesitating before coming off his line for crosses. Nothing obvious enough to show up in statistics, but noticeable to those who understood the subtleties of defensive coordination. The Champions League quarterfinal against Real Madrid represented everything Liverpool had been building toward. After years of near misses and rebuilding, Jurgen Klopp had assembled a team capable of challenging for Europe's ultimate prize again. The first leg in Madrid had ended 2-1 to Real, a deficit but manageable. Anfield under the lights, with its legendary atmosphere, had produced miracle comebacks before. The match started with the intensity that only Champions League nights at Anfield can produce. 54,000 voices creating a wall of sound that seemed to shake the stadium's foundations. Liverpool pressed with relentless energy. Salah was unplayable down the right. Nunez terrorized Real's defense with his movement, and at the back, Alisson commanded his penalty. Area with authority that seemed to dare Real Madrid to test him. In the 38th minute, Salah scored. Anfield erupted. 1-0 Liverpool. Aggregate 2-2. The dream was alive. Real Madrid, experienced in these pressure situations, didn't panic. They absorbed Liverpool's intensity, waited for gaps to appear, and struck with clinical efficiency. In the 51st minute, Vinicius equalized. 1-1. Aggregate 2-3. Liverpool needed 2 more goals. The match became frantic. Liverpool pushed forward desperately, leaving space at the back. Real Madrid's counterattacks became increasingly dangerous. Alisson made 3 world-class saves in quick succession. Point blank from Rodrigo, a one-on-one against Bellingham, a reflex stop from a deflected shot. He was keeping Liverpool's hopes alive through sheer brilliance. Konaté watched from the defensive line, marveling at saves that seemed to defy physics. This was the Alisson he'd learned from, the goalkeeper who made the impossible routine. But he also noticed something else. Alisson was staying deeper on his line than usual, less aggressive in claiming crosses, slightly hesitant when judging whether to come out for through balls. In the 68th minute, Diogo Jota scored. 2-1 Liverpool. Aggregate 3-3. 1 more goal, and Liverpool would advance on away goals. Anfield was delirious with belief, but Real Madrid sensed Liverpool's vulnerability. They began targeting the space between Konaté and Alisson with crosses and through balls, testing the communication that had always been so reliable. In the 73rd minute, Modric received the ball on the right wing. Liverpool's defensive line was high, pressing for that crucial third goal. Modric, with decades of experience, recognized the opportunity immediately. He shaped a cross toward the far post. Konaté read the trajectory and began his movement toward the ball's landing spot, trusting, as he always had, that if he misjudged, Alisson would be there. The cross was perfect, hanging in the air, dropping into that dangerous space between defender and goalkeeper. Konaté jumped, fully committed, but the ball sailed just beyond his reach. He expected to hear Alisson's voice. Mine, or away, the signals that had coordinated their movements hundreds of times before. But the call never came. Alisson had started to come off his line, then hesitated, uncertain whether Konaté had the ball covered. That fraction of a second, that moment of indecision was all it took. The ball dropped behind Konaté, and Benzema, timing his run to perfection, was there. The header was simple, clinical, devastating. 2-2, aggregate 4-3 to Real Madrid. Anfield went silent. Konaté wheeled around, his face a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He looked at Alisson, arms spread in a "why didn't you call" gesture. Alisson stared back, his expression unreadable behind his concentration, but his body language defensive. The final whistle came 15 minutes later. Liverpool's Champions League dream was over. Real Madrid advanced to the semifinals. The Anfield miracle hadn't materialized. As players trudged off the pitch, Alisson walked alone, his face a mask of barely controlled emotion. He'd made brilliant saves all night, but the one moment that mattered, the one cross he should have commanded, had gone unclaimed, and he knew why. He'd hesitated because his judgment on those 50-50 balls wasn't what it used to be. At 31, with years of diving and collisions taking their toll, his explosive movement off the line had lost a fraction of its certainty. In the tunnel, Konaté caught up to him. The young defender's face was flushed with frustration and confusion. "Why didn't you call?" Konaté asked, his voice tight with emotion. "I jumped because I thought you had it, but there was no call. Nothing. You should have cleared it anyway," Alisson said, his voice cold. "That was your zone." "My zone?" Konaté's voice rose in disbelief. "That cross was right in the corridor we've always shared. For 3 years, you've called those balls. 3 years, and tonight, when it mattered most, silence. Maybe you need to take more responsibility instead of always expecting me to bail you out," Alisson snapped back. "Bail me out?" Konaté was almost shouting now. "I do my job, I defend, but when a cross comes in that space, you're supposed to communicate. That's what goalkeepers do. That's what you've always done." Other players were slowing down, sensing the confrontation escalating. "I'm tired of being blamed when defenders make mistakes," Alisson said, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Every goal, everyone looks at the goalkeeper. Maybe look at yourself first." "This isn't about blame." Konaté's frustration boiled over. "This is about communication. You hesitated. You didn't come. You didn't call. And it cost us everything." "I hesitated because you were there," Alisson shot back. "You jumped for it. How am I supposed to know if you're going to get it or not?" "Because you call it," Konaté was shouting now. "That's the whole point. You read it faster than I do. You always have. But tonight you didn't, and I need to know why." The silence that followed was suffocating. Alisson stared at Konaté, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Vulnerability, fear, the weight of truth he didn't want to speak. "Maybe it's time to accept that your best days are behind you," Konaté said quietly, the words landing like a physical blow. Alisson's face went rigid. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Konaté's voice was softer now, almost sad. "Something's changed. You're not coming off your line like you used to. You're not attacking crosses the same way. And tonight, when we needed you most, you weren't there. Not because you couldn't be, because you were afraid." "Afraid?" Alisson's voice was ice. "Afraid of making a mistake. Afraid of missing the ball. Afraid of looking slow." Konaté took a breath. "I'm not saying this to hurt you, but if we're going to play together, I need to know. Are you still the goalkeeper who taught me how to defend? Or are you someone different now?" Alisson stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper but shaking with rage. "I've forgotten more about goalkeeping than you'll ever know about defending. Don't you ever question my commitment or my ability again?" He turned and walked toward the dressing room, leaving Konaté standing alone in the tunnel, chest heaving with emotions he couldn't fully process. The Liverpool dressing room was a tomb. Players sat in devastated silence, still in their kits, unable to process the magnitude of elimination. Klopp stood in the center, searching for words that might provide meaning to meaningless loss. But the tension between Alisson and Konaté was palpable. They sat at opposite ends of the room, avoiding all eye contact. Van Dijk, Liverpool's captain, watched both of them carefully, recognizing the fracture that had formed. The next morning, English media dissected the goal from every angle. Pundits debated whether it was Konaté's responsibility to clear or Alisson's to claim. But inside Melwood, the whispers were more personal. Players had heard the tunnel confrontation. Some sided with Alisson. A legendary goalkeeper didn't deserve to be questioned by a defender barely into his mid-20s. Others quietly agreed with Konaté. Something had changed in Alisson's game, and pretending otherwise was dangerous. Training on Friday was professional but cold. Alisson and Konaté barely spoke. When forced to work together in defensive drills, their communication was minimal, clinical, stripped of the intuitive understanding that had made them so effective. Klopp pulled them both into his office after training. His expression was serious, almost sad. "What happened in that tunnel cannot define this club," Klopp said quietly. "I don't care who said what. I don't care who feels hurt. What I care about is that Liverpool Football Club cannot function when our defensive foundation is fractured." Neither player responded. "Alisson," Klopp continued, his voice gentle but firm, "you are one of the best goalkeepers I've ever worked with. Your shot stopping is still world class. Your distribution is exceptional. But football demands honesty. From all of us, including about what we can and can't do anymore." Alisson's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "And Konaté," Klopp turned to the young defender, "you have the talent to become one of Europe's elite center-backs. But talent without wisdom is just potential, and wisdom sometimes means understanding that truth delivered with compassion heals, while truth delivered with anger destroys." He let the words settle before continuing. "You both made mistakes against Real Madrid, tactical, physical, emotional, but the biggest mistake would be letting this destroy what you've built, because next season starts in 3 months, and Liverpool needs both of you at your best." After Klopp left them alone, the silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Alisson spoke, his voice barely audible. "I felt it during the match, the cross hanging in the air. I started to come, and then I wasn't sure I'd get there in time. So I hesitated, and in that hesitation, everything fell apart." Konaté looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in Alisson's voice. "I've been feeling it for months," Alisson continued. "Little things, crosses I used to claim easily now feel like 50-50 balls. Through balls I used to race off my line for now make me calculate risk differently. My body doesn't respond with the same certainty it used to." "You're still one of the best in the world," Konaté said quietly. "But not what I was." Alisson's voice cracked slightly. "And admitting that is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Because if I'm not that goalkeeper anymore, then who am I?" Konaté was silent for a moment, processing the raw honesty. "You're the goalkeeper who taught me how to defend," Konaté said finally. "You're the one who showed me how to read attacks, how to position myself, how to communicate. Even if you've lost half a step coming off your line, your mind is still faster than anyone else on that pitch. But my hesitation cost us a Champions League semi-final," Alisson said bitterly. "And my words in the tunnel cost us our partnership," Konaté replied. "I was angry, devastated, and I said something cruel because I wanted someone to blame. But the truth is, we both made mistakes. You hesitated, I didn't clear, and we didn't communicate. That's on both of us." They sat in silence, the weight of mutual accountability settling between them. "We need to adapt," Konaté said eventually. "The way we work together. Maybe you don't come for those 50-50 crosses anymore. Maybe I take more responsibility in that corridor. Maybe we talk more, call earlier, leave less to interpretation. Which means you protect me while I become the aging goalkeeper who needs protecting," Alisson said with bitter humor. "No," Konaté's voice was firm. "It means we evolve. You were the leader when I arrived. You still are. But leadership changes. Maybe now it's less about you dominating every cross and more about you making me better. Teaching me to defend that space so you don't have to risk the 50-50 balls." Alisson met his eyes. "You really think we can get past this?" "I think we have to," Konaté said simply. "Because neither of us can do this alone, and Liverpool needs both of us." The season ended with Liverpool finishing third in the Premier League. Champions League football secured, but the trophy cabinet remaining empty. Summer brought introspection, recovery, and eventually pre-season training. When Alisson and Konaté returned to Melwood, something had shifted. They spoke more now, discussed positioning more explicitly, clarified responsibilities that had once been assumed. Konaté took more command of the corridor between penalty spot and 6-yard box. Alisson focused on what he did best: shot stopping, organizing the defense, distributing from the back. It wasn't the same as before, but it worked. In August, during a friendly against Bayern München, there was a moment. A dangerous cross came in, the exact type that had cost them against Real Madrid. Konaté and Alisson both moved toward it, and this time, the communication was crystal clear. "Mine!" Alisson shouted, his voice cutting through the crowd noise. Konaté immediately adjusted, dropping back to cover the second phase. Alisson claimed the cross cleanly, distributed quickly to start a counterattack. As they reset their positions, Konaté looked at Alisson and nodded. No words needed, just understanding. Alisson nodded back, and for the first time since that devastating night at Anfield, he smiled. The Champions League quarterfinal would always hurt. The words spoken in anger in the tunnel would never be fully forgotten. But they had discovered something more valuable than vindication. They had learned that greatness doesn't mean never declining. It means adapting when you do. Alisson was no longer the goalkeeper who could attack every cross with reckless confidence. But he had become something more valuable, a cerebral shot stopper who made everyone around him better through communication, positioning, and the wisdom that only comes from honest self-assessment. And Konaté had stopped being just a talented young defender. He had become the defensive anchor who could cover spaces, take command of dangerous situations, and protect his goalkeeper without diminishing him. They didn't need to be what they were before. They just needed to be honest about what they were now. Age catches everyone, but how you face it, with denial or adaptation, with ego or humility, that's what separates good from great. The ball hung in the air. This time, they both knew exactly who would claim it.